Welcome to the Nightlife Podcast, where we discuss all things having to do with Knights of Pythias.
We're back. The Nightlife Podcast.
We're back.
It's
Guess
late at
who?
night. It's late at night. We're recording this at almost 9:30. Me and Dylan have been talking, and we thought this would be a really interesting topic. We're going to be doing an esoteric discussion on Dionysius. Did I say that right?
Before we do that, though, I don't know. I say
I'm gonna say
Dionysius.
Dionysius.
If you look it up in the dictionary, actually, which I did, it is Dionysius for the American pronunciation. So, hey, this is the Esoteric podcast, so I can get into like spellings and pronunciations, right?
It's true.
So, if you look at Pythias, which famously there was like an anti-Knights of Pythias podcast, believe it or not, that was saying Knights of Pythias are evil. But they didn't say Knights of Pythias, they said Knights of Pythias. And they had this one lady on there who knew all about it because in her childhood she was involved in all of it. And she says it's pronounced Knights of Pythias. It's not pronounced Knights of Pythias. Nobody says that. But anyway, if you look at Pythias, the Y says I and the I says E, like Pythias, right?
Mhm.
So in Dionysius, I would say the I says E and the Y says I, like in the other one. However, I will never, ever correct you on it because I don't know the original language, and more importantly, the dictionary says it the way you're saying it. So
Oh, there you
go
go.
for it.
I appreciate that. Now I guess it depends too if it was like Webster's or Oxford or.
I just
But,
Googled it.
Just Google. Well, tonight's been busy. Me and immediate past Grand Chancellor Casey Pemberton from Montauk Lodge in the domain of Missouri went to St. Charles, Missouri, and had a Pythian information night at St. Charles Masonic Lodge. Trying to get a lodge started there, so a Pythian lodge started there. So hopefully that comes to fruition. But anyway, let's get into the meat of the discussion here, Dylan. So I brought the question to Dylan of what is Dionysius's main role? What is his role in the lesson of Pythianism? He can't just be the bad guy. There has to. I think we're supposed to learn something from him in the story / ritual. So, which happens to be the same role. So, Dylan, do you want to start the conversation out, or do you want me to, or how do you want to?
No, I would love to if I may be so honored. It is a great question. What is the character of the tyrant Dionysius, however you want to say it? I'll say Dionysius. So Dionysius is the tyrant king, and interestingly, tyrant didn't just mean a bad guy in control of things back then. There was actually I wouldn't go so far as to say a dictionary definition, but sort of the common usage of the term was a tyrant is somebody that comes in to power and shakes things up and in fact despoils the rich and gives land and riches to the common man. So that was one definition at the time of a tyrant, somebody who shook things up in that way. I can imagine that in far-flung corners of the world and in places maybe even nearer to home, that idea doesn't sound quite so tyrannical, but so it was. So I think he plays the role of somebody who, in the story, he's the antagonist, right? We have our protagonists, Damon and Pythias, and their loved ones. And then you have the antagonist of the tyrant, right? I think that the neophyte to Knights of Pythias, the candidate to the ranks, should take Dionysius as a cautionary tale. Because it's explained in the ritual, but we're not going to be giving away ritual secrets tonight. You can read this in any of the open literature, or even like the story of Damon and Pythias is told by Iamblichus. Iamblichus wrote The Life of Pythagoras, I believe is the title in English. The stories of Pythagoras well after he died, but if he ever lived at all, in fact. But not going down that rabbit hole
For
tonight.
the
That's another
next
esoteric
episode.
episode. Maybe so. But you can read for yourself that Dionysius was the antagonist in the story, and he didn't have real friends. You know, he had all the friends money could buy, as they say. Friendship was a means to an end. Friendship was not an end for him.
Yeah.
And so that's a bit of a cautionary tale. If you, at any point in your life, like you could be anybody. You could be the common man. You could be a president. You could be anything in between. If you have friends only for the sake of getting you somewhere, then that's not really friendship, is it? So it is a cautionary tale about friendship in particular. And you could even extend it further to power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And in fact, I think you see within the story, he's toying with Damon and Pythias. He sees them and their unbreakable friendship, and he just sees an opportunity to play. He wants to mock them, really. And
Yeah.
in the story, he puts forward
the OG
tests.
troll.
Yeah, yes, the OG troll. That's right. Very true. So he's trolling. He's trolling our bros, and that's not cool. So what winds up happening is he hears the idea that Pythias would be a hostage for Damon, you know, so that Damon can go settle his affairs at home and say goodbye to his family and all that. He's like, that's goofy. Like, what are you talking about? Nobody does that. This ain't real, right? So while Pythias is indeed in Damon's dungeon as a hostage for Damon's return, he knows Pythias has a fiance, Calanthe. And so he sends Calanthe down to say, hey, and Dionysius is in disguise, by the way. He says, hey, if you want to free your boyfriend, I have a ship down by the docks, and here's the key, and you can get out and, you know, get on the ship and escape all of this. You know, he's toying with them because is it even existential for him? No, this is just fun for the tyrant. And so, of course, as the story goes, Pythias refuses. No, I'm not even going to make an escape attempt, even if the way is clear. I'm going to stay true to my word. And so it goes. And at the end of the story, not to skip ahead too far, I don't know what kind of pacing you wanted for this aspect of the story. Yeah, skipping to the end, Damon returns to take Pythias's place at the chopping block, literally. And Dionysius says, "No, hold on. We're not doing this. Both of your lives are spared. This is incredible. I've never seen anything like this." And Iamblichus tells us, and you and I, David, we talked about this last night. This is recorded in non-fraternal sources. This is history, right? As trusted as you can be for the time, for historians. Yes, scare quotes. Exactly. He says, the tyrant asked, "Can I be the third member of your friendship? This bond that you have, this Pythagorean bond. You know, they were members of the Pythagorean Brotherhood, as it's said. Can I join in with you and become a companion?" And they told him, "You cannot just give up your life. You've lived your entire life with ambition and greed and avarice, and that's not something you just turn over overnight. You know, like, basically, no, you can't." And he did not, in fact, join the Pythagorean Brotherhood, but he did become friendly towards them, and that's how we got his account. His side of the story, according to Iamblichus, was told by him. So
I like that, and I'm glad that you kind of told the whole story so that we can, because my view on it, like we were talking last night, is Dionysius is this sort of initiator. He's the catalyst in the story. He's what makes the story really the story. And in a way, because he's the one who puts Damon and Pythias in the situation. And so, you know, who is our initiator? You know, what in life is your initiator? What's the catalyst between you and you being a Pythian knight? And, you know, is it you need to be more charitable? Is it you need to be more benevolent? Do you need to be more friendly? So I think we look at Dionysius and we ask ourselves, who is our Dionysius in our life? What situation or person is going to be that catalyst to me being a better Pythian knight? So it might be a brother you struggle with in lodge. It might be someone that you have to kind of have friendship with. You have to have, be more charitable, be more merciful to that brother, because he might frustrate you, and maybe for good reason he frustrates you, but it doesn't mean that you have to be unkind. It doesn't mean that you should quit the order. It means that
Even if there's an easy path.
yeah, you really become a Knight of Pythias. And so I think we need to look at challenges in and outside of the lodge as our Dionysius, and it being the catalyst to show we truly are a Knight of Pythias. And just like what Pythias said, even if Damon doesn't show up, right? Even if that brother doesn't ever change his ways, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to hold a grudge. I know that it is what it is. He tried his best. So I think that that's, in my view, Dionysius is kind of this catalyst or initiator into real Pythian knighthood. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or if you have maybe a different view of Dionysius than that.
No, I don't think I have a different view. I think there's a lot of nuance to that. And
Yeah.
to get into it a little bit, because I'm thinking of bits that aren't for public consumption, and I'm not trying to be secret squirrel about it, but when you go through all three ranks, you kind of get a sense of exactly the flavor of the meaning behind even individual words, right? So, not trying to sound too secretive or obscure. I think that in our obligations, we're warned against giving people sticks to beat us with, if that makes sense. So there's that. We're also warned that, and this is good for public consumption, I think, you cannot hide behind the Order of Knights of Pythias in order to break the law. You cannot hide behind Knights of Pythias in order to, in general, be a bad person. The phrase conduct unbecoming a gentleman, I don't think that's any too secretive. You cannot claim that you can't, cross your fingers. What's that called? King's X, whatever. You can't say no. That's off limits because hey,
Yeah.
I'm a brother knight. I can do whatever. I think in your application, we should apply what you're saying, David. I agree. In your application, that should start between your left ear and end at your right ear. And when it comes to the conduct of others, if you think they're not extending that level of charity to another, whether it's another brother knight or a situation in private or public life, however you want to put it, you can just take a personal lesson and apply it in your own life.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be doing that. I'm gonna take your advice and be doing that.
Well, and I think that was, even at the presentation I did this evening at the Masonic Lodge, on Pythian knighthood, one of the things that I told them was, I said, a lot of people get charity and benevolence. They kind of try to smash them together as if they're the same thing. And they're not. So, a big part of being a Pythian knight is having friendship, charity, and benevolence. But the big difference between charity and benevolence is that charity is this physical act of, I'm taking these coats and I'm giving them to the poor, or I'm giving money to a good cause. Benevolence is the change of heart. Benevolence is, I'm speaking kindly. I'm being a positive influence in my home, in my community, in my lodge. I'm holding the door open for someone. I'm going just up to ask them, do you need any help? It's this, it's an individual thing. Charity usually happens on a organizational, not always, right? But usually charity is kind of this organizational effort to give some kind of material, money or physical clothing or something like that, food, to someone, and benevolence is just individual small acts of kindness in your daily life. And I think that that's why benevolence is kind of the overarching tenet of Pythia knighthood, because yeah, you have friendship and yeah, you have charity, but it, benevolence is taking those two things, smashing them together and making it individual and making it part of your everyday life, and not just an act here or an act there, but in everything that you do. And I think
Yeah.
that, and that's what I was explaining to them tonight, we really do, believe in that. And we see from readings, I mean, we were looking last night, and that's what I told them. I said, a lot of people think, well, why do we need Knights of Pythias? Why do we need Freemasonry? Why do we need Oddfellows? They're all basically the same. They're basically just a club. Well, kind of, but not really. And one of the big differences, was it James R. Carnahan? Is that how you say his name, Dylan?
Yeah, Carnahan, yeah.
Yeah, he said in that, was it Pythia Knighthood, about the Civil War. He talked about, the fact that he said, we had Freemasonry, and that didn't stop the Civil War. Brothers were killing brothers and things like that. Now, kind of a harsh judgment, right, on Freemasonry, I think, honestly. I mean, I'm a Freemason myself.
I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't blame the
Freemasonry.
how it got going on a failure on the Freemasons' part. No,
and that's what I thought.
think there was a lot going on.
Yeah, and he just came out of war, from the Civil War.
Yes,
but I understand what he was saying.
He's from Indiana, so yeah.
And he basically, all he was trying to say is that Pythia Knighthood is trying to bring out world peace. We have Freemasonry, and that is good, but he was just trying to suggest that Pythia Knighthood really is about creating world peace, and that's what I get from his commentary in that book. And I thought that was really interesting. Again, kind of harsh words to say against really myself, because I am a Freemason, but others who are wonderful brothers. And I think we take that information and we say, these men believed that Knights of Pythias was supposed to stop this catalyst, right? These rituals / these tenets were going to bring about world peace. I think in a way we have to lean into that, and we have to say, if they believe that, we need that. I mean, you look at our day to day, and there's so much division among people in America. Once again, I think we need Pythia Knighthood more than ever, to bring people together and to settle conflict. And I think Dionysius, or whatever it is in your life, if you allow it to be the catalyst and allow it to be that initiator in your Pythia Knighthood, you'll come out conqueror of that situation and truly be a Knight of Pythias.
Oh, I totally agree with that. But let me take a moment to disagree with you, David.
Please do.
And this is the moment, ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing our friendship falling apart and the Pythian experiment failing right before your eyes. No, I'm gonna. Of course, you and I are good friends, and if we were to have a serious disagreement, I would still approach it with, tenderness and understanding, right? This is not a serious disagreement. I only take partial disagreement, and I'm being a total pedant here. But here's my take. Here's my take on something mentioned, charity versus benevolence. I think sometimes when Knights of Pythias look at the cardinal principles of friendship, charity, and benevolence, I do think some people hear friendship, friendship, and friendship. And other people hear charity, and charity, and charity, and so on. I think there are very core distinctions. Where I would say, what I would take issue with what you said, very pedantically, I think charity is the one where it's that individual choice between your ears to say, I'm going to assume the best here in this situation about my brother. And you know what the amazing thing is? we are very likely both right, because friendship and charity and benevolence not only build up, it goes, boop, 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 the rank of page is the friendship rank, and then
Yeah.
esquire's charity, and then knight is benevolence, right?
Yeah.
Well, they build up on each other, but they also build back. They reinforce each other. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I even partially disagree with you. I'm viewing part of the building back differently, and that's probably particular to my life and experience. So I think benevolence is the one that strikes me as what most people would call charity. So benevolence, goodwill, wanting the best for mankind, your neighbors. You start with your home, and then your neighbors, and outward your lodge. You want the best. With charity, the lesson of charity as I learned it is we are all human, and interestingly enough, in the rank of page, you learn that we don't use the word perfection around here. We're not going for that.
Well, before we
We're
get into
going
this,
for
Alan, I just
improvement.
want to say, how dare you correct me in public, in front of our
I'm
millions
done.
of in front of our millions of viewers?
Yes. Well,
I can't believe you did that. You threw me right under the bus.
take your lumps, David. Take your lumps. No, yeah. So it builds on each other, and it builds back, and dare I say, it builds back better. And I think that's something that every American can agree on. Are we editing this out? I don't even know.
We're trying to make Pythianism great again.
I'm trying my best to be like, how would absolutely everyone agree with everything that I'm saying, but also be funny at the same time, and it's just not working. I don't think it's gonna work.
Oh gosh.
Okay, and you know what? A great goal for a Knight of Pythias is be a long-term member in your subordinate lodge, and your brothers just have no idea what your actual political leanings are. And it's not even like you wouldn't be able to talk politics. If you just uphold your Pythian values, no matter how you're registered to vote, no matter how you view each issue, if you're upholding your Pythian values, you should probably be able to get away with folks having no idea what your political persuasion is. I think that's possible.
Well, and I think that is, speaking of political views, that could be the Dionysius. That could be the initiator for someone within a lodge, or
Perfect.
out in their public life. Are you being a peacemaker? It doesn't. No, because I look at it like, no matter which way you lean, still doesn't mean that you get to be rude to someone else. Still doesn't mean that you should be talking down about somebody. We can, I remember my scoutmaster. It was known that, Barack Obama did not support the Boy Scouts when he kind of came out as in his presidential speakings. He wasn't a big supporter of Boy Scouts America. Well, I went to the National Jamboree of Boy Scouts while he was a president of the United States, and he did not come to the Jamboree, but he came on he sent us a recording basically just saying congratulations for 100 years, things like that. And a lot of people were booing. And my scoutmaster told every one of us boys to be quiet. And he said, you don't have to respect the man, but you at least need to respect the position. And, I think that taught me a lot about, you still have to be kind, you still have to be respectful, and that it's not okay to be rude. One of the things I saw on a high school wall in a hallway, painted on the wall, that said, just because you're right doesn't mean you get to be rude. And I love that, because so many times you feel like, oh, I'm right. I get to stand in this place, and basically I get to just say what I want to say and how I want to say it because I believe I'm right. And that's just not very kind. And it really probably won't get you very far in life. And so I think as Pythians, it really is up to us to be that peacemaker. If someone around you, even another brother in lodge, is being rude or contentious or whatever, you can always just say, hey, we don't really need to be talking about that. This is a Pythian lodge. It's creating contention. We don't need contention in our Pythian lodge, or even out in public. Hey, we don't need to be doing that. And I'm talking about, maybe if you're going to a lodge event, even if it's outside the lodge room, maybe not wear political party regalia.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah, there's kind of some being polite and thinking about how the other person will see you, how they'll view
Yeah,
you. And I have a couple of thoughts on that actually. I heard a really good quote. It doesn't just matter that you stand, it matters how you stand. And I try to remember that.
yeah,
But another thing, let's let's kind of Dionysiize your idea there, David. What would a Knight of Pythias do in Nazi Germany? Let's say you have a Grand Lodge of Germany, and it's 1936. Now, I I don't know exactly what the right answer is. No, I don't know exactly what the right answer is.
mm,
Certainly not support whoever's in power, right? Because we know what that would mean in that particular situation. So this is obviously, I'm taking this to a very far extreme. But I think maybe if you don't have an answer, because I honestly don't, I do not have an answer to this question. Maybe maybe folks can just mull this over. What is the chivalrous? What is the fraternal? What is the friendly, charitable, benevolent thing to do when you're a Knight of Pythias and you're in a position to where you're mindful of how you stand and you don't want to blow things out of proportion. You want to meet with proportion the
yeah,
situation you're in. Imagine you're a knight and imagine a Knight of Pythias in Nazi Germany. He would be like a knight on the battlefield and seeing overwhelming odds against him if he was to try to joust
yeah.
that windmill, you know?
Eh,
What are your
I think
thoughts?
about the phrase that comes to my mind when you ask that question was, if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So again, I don't necessarily know what that means for that situation and that person's situation, but if you're not
Mhm.
part of the solution, you're part of the problem. One of the things my dad told me one time was, when I was a young man, I think I was about 20 or 21. Um, I made a bad decision, and my dad said, either you're going to stand for what you believe, or you need to quit the organization. Either you're going to do what the organization's asking you to do, and you're going to stand up and believe in it and do it, and not be a hypocrite, and all those things, or you need to leave the organization, because there's no reason to be that kind of person. Don't be that guy. you know
Mhm.
and so I think that, for me, that's kind of how I view. It's always stuck with me, and that's how I view Knights of Pythias. I really do believe in the message that Knights of Pythias gives, and I do believe, if you look at people, I go back to James R. Carnahan, because he fought in the Civil War. He was there, and he was a Knight of Pythias, and you can tell in his writings that Knights of Pythias was the solution in a way for him, and he thought for the
Mhm.
country. And so I have to believe, man, a person who went through the Civil War, who saw brother fight brother, who saw that not even other fraternal bonds could stop it, that, all of these things, he comes out on the backside and says, man, this Knights of Pythia stuff really is part of the solution.
Yeah.
Speaks to me volumes about what I should be doing with it, how I should be using it in my life, when it's not like I have to pick up a gun or a baton or whatever and go to war, but
Mm.
I can pick up the theoretical gun or whatever, and or shield or whatever you want to say, and go to war with evil, and go to war with
Mhm.
negativity, and go to war with people who want to do bad. Even if I'm just an example within my home and the small group of people that are around me, in my workplace or things like that, even if I just show them what being a Pythian is, it is well worth me being an honest person and being an honest Pythian. So I do believe in the tenets, and I do believe it can better people's lives if they live a life of Pythian knighthood as it should be.
But very well said. Yeah, and I'm kind of inspired to think of within my very extreme hypothetical. I'm inspired to think that, if you
You know,
had
Dylan, I want
a
you to think
mixed
if you're Hitler, but you were also a Pythian.
hmm, well, let me think about this. No. Uh Try to be serious, David. This is
Sorry, I
this is the
apologize.
esoteric episode. It's
I
the
know.
only esoteric episode we're going to do.
I know.
We're
I'm
never
sorry.
revisiting
We'll
this
quit.
subject again because you keep talking about Hitler. No, I brought that up. All right. We're out of control. Uh Imagining like a split lodge in 1938, 1939 even. Nazi Germany, Knights of Pythias. I don't think there were any over there at the time, but imagine seeing, like, no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, of the German political spectrum, you're a Knight of Pythias and you see others that don't agree with you in whatever way. It was coming to blows already, I mean, people were being hauled off to camps, and however much supposedly wasn't known, they knew enough.
Yeah.
So, what I think I'm inspired to think at this time is that the Knights of Pythias organization is a little guarantee, and maybe a big guarantee, that you are not going to encounter somebody who will endanger your very life here. You're going to, a brother Knight of Pythias, even if they disagree, and that's okay to disagree, right? Your life is not in danger by a brother, but especially if you are doing what is right and good. And the conversations in that lodge, ideally, would be measured and free from emotion to the degree that it should be. I hear it often said that women are emotional and men are logical. And I think that's hilarious. Because I know me, I'm emotional. I'm logical, but I'm emotional.
I've
And
sat in enough lodges to know that old men argue about how to cook sausage. You know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly. It's part of being human. If you're not emotional, and
yeah.
especially if you're going through, let's take it out of Nazi Germany. That's getting a little too intense. Let's say
I think the name of this episode is "Was Hitler a Pythian?" Question mark. Oh God.
the new name of the episode is Hitler was definitely not a Pythian. Can we monetize this at this point? I think we just got demonetized.
Yeah.
Good golly, David. Okay, we're moving. I'm searching through the annals of history. Okay, it's the 1990s, and Bill Clinton is being impeached. All right.
And all the Pythians have frosted tips.
Frost them if you got them. So it's the 1990s. Bill Clinton's being impeached. I actually remember that. I was a kid. I remember. Everybody was talking about it, and everybody had their nuanced take on it. Like, how do we deal with this, right? And so I think you could have a lodge of Knights of Pythias, and it probably happened, that disagreed and on how to proceed with that question.
Yeah.
And I can just see now, nobody's going to lose their home, nobody's going to lose their position in the lodge because they slightly disagree, but the appeal should be made to what is good, what is right, what is the corrective course of action. If there's a corrective course to take, what would that be? That kind of thing. And I also imagine, there's a quote, it's a Pythian quote, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's something along the lines of, when there's a battle to be waged, when there's a question before you, don't ask if it's popular to fight that fight. Ask if it is right.
Yeah.
And if it's right, fight, and if needs be, die for it. And thank God for the opportunity for that royal battle. Something like that.
Yeah.
If you have a persuasion on any given social or political issue, and you feel that there is one right answer, and you strongly feel it, you should go to people who might disagree and say, this is my feeling on it, and here's what it's based on. Here's the book of law. Here's the philosophy I follow. Tell me what you think. Like, where am I wrong? Show me where I'm wrong. And they might even think you're wrong and try to tell you, yeah, you're way off track here. And you can take their advice and say, okay, maybe I need to refine my thinking, but maybe they're also wrong. That's their battle to fight. I just fought that battle with them. I brought them my best, they brought me their best, and we learned something from it, and now we're going to move on. And the Order of Knights of Pythias is not the organization where we're going to be drawing swords of offense. Our swords are swords of defense.
Yeah.
We're defending what's right, we're defending our inner selves, etc.
And I think one of the things, I think the conversation of politics, honestly, really, in my opinion, if you're doing Pythianism right at your lodge meeting, politics probably should never even come up, because you're too busy either having fun, talking about bills, or receiving education. Pythian education.
Oh, I love talking about bills.
And I really think that, those kind of conversations come up probably at a social event or after, before lodge, things like that. But I think the thing that I see that was interesting is going back and looking at the history of our lodge, Cecilia number 39, is they had political candidates, local political candidates from both sides that were Pythians in the same lodge during the exact same time. And it was in the minutes, and it was in the newspapers. I've read about it, how this candidate was a member and they were a Democrat, and this candidate was a member too and he was a Republican, and whatever. And of course there's more political parties than just those two, but I'm just saying it had both ends of the spectrum in lodge at the same time. And I don't know if both men were active. It doesn't say if they were active or not, but they were both members. And what that tells me is, in those days when there's a lot of activity, they didn't necessarily need members in a sense like we do now. They weren't leaning one side. That lodge wasn't leaning to one side or the other, saying we're going to just support this candidate or just support this candidate. Both candidates were a member of the exact same lodge. Hopefully both were active. I'm hoping. But it doesn't really matter. I think it speaks for the lodge and their view on those things, if that makes sense. I think the biggest thing I think from this whole conversation is, what are we going in our lives allow to be our Dionysius? And using Pythian knighthood to the reason to, not the reason, you should be good even if you're not a Knight of Pythias. I'm not saying that. I'm saying,
right,
if you are a Knight of Pythias, really being a Knight of Pythias, and when you do have a Dionysius in your life of whatever kind, you're not going to allow it to, you're going to allow it to be a catalyst for your Pythian knighthood. But also, right, you're not going to just allow that member, you're not going to allow that thing to come into your life and be a part of your brotherhood either. You need to draw a line. You got to have a boundary there as well. And I think that's another side of it, is if there is a Dionysius that is in your, that is creating toxicity within your life, you say, hey, you should be a friend and you should be charitable and you should be benevolent, but you can't be that here.
Right.
Because you're going to drag the others down. And I think that's a whole other touchy subject, but and that's not just talking about a brother in lodge, but that's talking about other things in life too. You're not going to let something come into your life that's toxic and
right. Yeah, I'm reminded of bits from the ritual where we're basically told, when you're friends with somebody, it's easy to say, hey, good job, buddy. Good job on this thing. I really liked this thing you did. But it's kind of a different story when it's like, oh, that's not quite right. You kind of, there's a flaw here.
Yeah.
And you need to know how to say that. You need to know how to say both.
Yeah.
Of course, it's never a bad idea to be quick with encouragement, but you do have to be slow with, not discouragement, but slow with correction.
Yeah.
And so if you see somebody, and for heaven's sakes, if it's a matter of personal preference, maybe just don't say anything at all. Maybe just that's their thing, you know? But if it's a matter of importance, if it's a matter of principle, if it's a matter of character,
Yeah.
we need to be able to guide our brothers down the straight and narrow path, so to speak. The castle hall is a school of the night.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be clean, bright. We're doing the better side of life in Knights of Pythias, and that has to mean something objectively. It can't just be, you know, yeah, we're living the better sort of life. We don't beat our dogs as hard as we beat our children, so that's got to count for something. No. There needs to be an objective goodness, an objective. There's got to be good guys and bad guys in the world, and our job is to make the number of bad guys by the cleanest and best means possible. Make them fewer. Turn them into good guys. But then again, we don't make good men in the Knights of Pythias. We make good Freemasons better.
That's one of the funniest.
I tried to be serious for like a solid 2 minutes.
I know. It's really one of the funniest memes ever because the Freemasons have their slogan, "We take good men and make them better." And there's a meme for Pythians, you know, "We take good Freemasons and make them better." And it's so funny. It's so funny. It really is. And the funny part is most Pythians are Freemasons. I mean, Justice H. Rathbone, the founder of Order of Knights of Pythias, was a Freemason. You know, so it's just funny. It really is. Well, Dylan, we're going to wrap up the episode here. Is there anything that you want to leave us with on the esoterics of Dionysius?
First, I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, this was part 1, I assure you, because we got into about 5% of our notes on this one.
Well, there's going to be a whole other episode about Pythians having to do with Stalin, not just Hitler, but also Stalin. That's a whole other.
Was Dionysius literally Hitler? Is the name of the next episode, so stay tuned.
Yes.
No, actually, I do like how the conversation was organic, right? So I liked that. I do have a final thought. We're in a tough situation in the world and in the United States. We're all at each other's throats. And you may be of the opinion that some people deserve to have others their throats at, so to speak, if you get what I mean. I would leave you with this one thought. When it comes to the Order of Knights of Pythias, or a good fraternal order, you need something, some place, a space you can go where you're not going to have people at your throat. And even if that includes a space with people who would be at your throat, you know, they're of the political mindset that opposes yours. You know, you walk through those doors and they're going to look at you and they're going to shake your hand. And in the back of their mind, they're going to be thinking all those political opinions you have that they hate. But what are they actually going to see? They're going to see a brother Knight of Pythias that they would be willing to stick up for. You need to earn that from them, first of all. And that's on you. So earn their loyalty and do your best to be worthy of that. That's all I got. Mic drop.
Dylan, thanks so much for your time. We've had a lot of fun tonight. We do have more to discuss on the esoterics of Dionysius. We're burning the old midnight oil here doing this episode. But anyway, it's been fun, and I hope everyone liked this episode. And please like it, subscribe to our channel, and share it. Share it with as many Knights of Pythias or other fraternal brothers or non-fraternal brothers or sisters out there. Please email us. I do put our email at the bottom in the show notes. So please email us if you have any questions or need help or have comments or honestly want to be on the podcast. So again, please reach out to us. I check that email every single day. So thank you guys. And hey, Dylan, I'll see you later, man.
Thank you, David. Good job.
See ya.